You know, it feels like so many of us are paying a price just for speaking the truth right now.
Hmm.
I mean, you call out systemic injustice at school, you speak up on campus, or you try to organize online, and what's the reward?
Right. What happened?
It's immediate suspension or, getting shadow banned or being slapped with that label of being too angry.
It's the oldest trick in the book of oppression, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've done the right thing, you stood up for what's fair, but the system punishes you for it. And then it demands you be grateful for whatever small space you have left.
It's this impossible corner.
It is. It forces you to question yourself. Like, how are you supposed to maintain your confidence, your moral center, when the people in power are actively trying to break your spirit?
And it just creates this intense, justified anger. You know you're right, but you're the one being disciplined.
Right.
It makes you feel like the only options are to either lash out until you're totally isolated or just shut down.
And that tension, that exact pressure cooker of justified rage meeting systemic backlash, that is the central challenge our hero today faced.
But, I mean, under the most extreme conditions you can imagine.
Right.
So the core reflection for all of us here is this. When you know you're right, but you're the one being punished, what do you do with that anger? Do you let it own you? Or do you turn it into something else?
Something confident.
Something liberating, yeah.
Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into the life of Nelson Mandela, the South African freedom fighter who really became a template for perseverance. He spent 27 brutal years in prison for resisting apartheid, yet his ultimate choice was this disciplined action, this forgiveness over revenge.
And that choice guided an entire country from a racist police state to a democracy.
His story is just a masterclass in converting justified anger into strategic, sustained action.
It really is. Born in 1918 in Mvezo, he moves from this rural life to become a lawyer in Johannesburg and, quickly becomes a key leader in the African National Congress, the ANC. And by 1964, for resisting that racist system, he was tried at Rivonia.
The famous trial.
Yeah.
That's where he stood before his oppressors and stated so clearly that the ideal of a free, non-racial society was one he was prepared to die for.
That clarity is it's incredible to know what you're willing to sacrifice everything for, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment.
And that refusal to let hatred decide his future, that's what makes his leadership so profound. It wasn't about being passive.
No.
Not at all. It was about strategically choosing the highest ground. But you're right, a leader like that isn't created overnight.
Exactly. It wasn't some instant transformation. Okay, so let's unpack this because the turning point, the real process of self-mastery, it began in the one place designed specifically to crush him.
Robben Island.
Robben Island, a cold, desolate prison island in the Atlantic.
And Robben Island was, it was total psychological warfare. Just imagine facing years of systemic dehumanization.
What did that look like day to day?
A small, damp cell. A single thin blanket. Hard labor in the lime quarry, where the dust literally destroyed your eyesight.
Yeah.
And every minute, you're under surveillance by guards who are actively looking for any sign of weakness, of despair.
They wanted to see him break.
The system's goal was simple.
Nah.
Break the mind before it breaks the body.
But Mandela, he had a totally different vision for his time there.
Completely different.
He treated his body and his mind not as a graveyard of surrender, but as a training ground. It was his way of exerting agency when every single external freedom had been stripped away. He imposed this strict daily discipline on himself, rising at 5 a.m. to exercise in that cramped cell, just refusing to let his physical environment dictate his mental state.
And what's so crucial to understand is that this wasn't just physical endurance. It was intellectual strategy.
Right?
He began studying Africans, the language of his jailers, the architects of apartheid. He studied their history, their culture.
And this wasn't about making friends.
No, not at all. It was about understanding the inner workings of his enemy to gain strategic leverage. He was turning personal hurt into political foresight. He just denied them the satisfaction of controlling how he felt.
And this inner discipline,
Yeah.
it fueled this immense secret project, an act of just sheer defiance.
Writing his autobiography.
Long Walk to Freedom, the first draft meticulously transcribed on tiny scraps of paper.
The story of that manuscript is just, it's heartbreaking. During routine search, the guards discovered it.
Yeah.
Years of work, his entire history, the whole narrative of the struggle.
Gone.
Gone. They destroyed it completely.
And here's the truly unbelievable part. Instead of letting that catastrophic loss just fuel his bitterness, send him into a rage or despair, He simply decided to start again.
Hmm.
He consistently refused any offers of early release if they required him to renounce the struggle. That refusal to give up his story or his principles was the ultimate act of self-confidence.
And then came the ingenious part, the disciplined action. He worked so carefully with a fellow prisoner, Mac Maharaj, to smuggle the finished manuscript out, page by page.
Hidden inside empty cocoa containers.
It was a complete refusal to let the state steal his narrative. That decision to just begin again, to protect your purpose at all costs. I mean, that's the definition of endurance.
It really is.
So just think about this for a moment. If you lost years of work, if your freedom was stolen, would you let that injustice burn everything down on the inside? Or would you begin again, like your story and your purpose still matter?
And that whole journey, from this deep personal trauma to a strategic rebuilding, it just bridges so perfectly to Marcus Garvey's framework for mental liberation.
It really does.
The head, heart, and hands philosophy. When Garvey said, if you have no confidence in self, you are twice defeated in the race of life. With confidence, you have won even before you have started. He was talking about the head, right? The mindset.
That's precisely it. The head is all about self-mastery. For Mandela, his 5 a.m. routine, his study of Afrikaans, that wasn't about defeating an enemy physically.
Right.
It was about mastering himself. His anger, his ego, his despair, so he could lead a whole country out of violence. He realized he needed to be mentally free before he could be physically free.
So that mental liberation has to be linked to a driving motivation, which is the heart, the purpose. What did Garvey mean by that, and how did Mandela embody it?
Well, Garvey insisted that purpose must always serve the collective community. For Mandela, the heart was his unwavering commitment to that non-racial democratic South Africa he voiced at Rivonia.
His identity had to expand.
It had to. He shifted from being defined solely as a freedom fighter, which, often relies on conflict, to being defined as a healer for a deeply fractured nation. His ultimate goal was liberation for all, not just revenge for Black South Africans.
And that clarity is what enabled the hands, the concrete, disciplined action. When we fast forward to his release in 1990, the entire world was watching.
Oh, absolutely.
Waiting to see if he would ignite a bloody civil war, or if he'd step into these fragile negotiations.
And we see that disciplined action immediately. I mean, think about the context of 1993. Chris Hani, a hugely popular communist leader and a hero of the ANC, was assassinated by white extremists.
And Hani's death was the trigger point, right? It could have started a nationwide civil war.
The country was on the absolute brink. It was an explosive moment of anger and fear for the community.
It had to be.
But Mandela, who wasn't even president yet, he stepped onto live television and delivered this incredibly disciplined appeal. He called for calm, for organized, disciplined protest, reminding the nation that the assassination was an attempt to derail their democratic future.
Wow.
You could argue his intervention was the one action that prevented mass slaughter. He used his authority not to encourage justified rage, but to channel it into controlled political power.
And then there's the most difficult action he helped champion, the one that sometimes gets forgotten.
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission?
The TRC. Yeah. This institution provided amnesty in exchange for truthful testimony from perpetrators of apartheid crimes. It required just immense moral confidence.
It did. Because it wasn't about punishing every single wrong. It was about choosing national healing over satisfying every demand for retribution. He had to push back against parts of his own community who demanded vengeance.
And that connects to the bigger picture, to maybe the most powerful symbol of that confident, unifying action.
The 1995 Rugby World Cup.
Absolutely. Rugby had been the ultimate symbol of white domination and racial division in South Africa.
And yet, there's Mandela, walking out onto the field wearing the Springbok jersey, the green and gold that symbolized decades of oppression for so many.
That's it. It was this highly visible, strategic action that modeled what healing looks like in public. By embracing the symbol of the oppressor, he disarmed it.
He proved that endurance without bitterness isn't weakness, it's strategy. He proved that true confidence, rooted in self-mastery and a communal purpose, can unite rather than divide.
That distinction strategy over emotional reaction, that is everything. Which brings us to a mini reflection pause. Where in your life are you tempted to prove your worth with rage alone? Maybe it's in a group chat or a class debate. And what would it look like to move with that Mandela-level confidence, with that calm and clarity instead?
Because systems today, from school discipline boards that disproportionately punish Black students to algorithms trying to minimize your voice, They still try to make you doubt your own mind.
And try to convince you that your justified anger is the problem that needs to be suppressed.
Exactly. But Mandela's entire life echoes this lesson. Your mind and your choices are still fundamentally yours, even when the system is grossly unfair. He didn't allow his captors to define his identity or his ultimate purpose.
He owned his own story.
He did. So this week, we want to issue a direct challenge focused on cultivating that Mandela confidence. It's a 4-part action plan.
Okay, what is it?
First, pick one space where you usually feel silenced or where your frustration just boils over. It could be a toxic group chat, a difficult class, even a stressful meeting.
Okay, one space.
Second, step back and write down what you really think or feel about one issue. Define it with clarity, not just heat. Get your principles on paper.
So you know what you stand for.
Exactly. Third, decide one calm, confident action you can take that matches those words. This could be asking a structured, pointed question, setting a clear boundary, or maybe sending a fact-based email.
A small, deliberate
A
action.
small, deliberate action. And finally, take that action once. Just once, even if your voice shakes or you feel intimidated. Do it with the clarity of purpose that Mandela carried.
And at the end of the week, take some time to ask yourself, did acting with quiet confidence change how you saw yourself, how you saw your own authority, even if nobody else applauded you for it?
Right.
Share your story with someone you trust, or, send us a note if you feel ready.
So let's recap the core revelation here. The true genius of Mandela's leadership wasn't that prison didn't hurt him.
Of course it did.
Of course, it's that he absolutely refused to let that hurt turn him into someone vengeful or bitter.
Yeah.
He disciplined his mind through study and routine. He protected his core purpose, a democratic South Africa, and he used his hands through negotiations, the TRC, and these profound symbolic gestures to heal a whole country.
So you may not be on an island in the cold Atlantic, but if you feel boxed in by school, by family, by systems that misread your intentions and minimize your voice, remember this provocative thought. Your cell doesn't decide your story. Your choices, rooted in confidence and discipline, do.
And next time, we go to the blueprint. The man whose teachings about the power of the head, hardened hands, created the philosophical foundation for resistance that echoed all through Mandela's journey.
Marcus Garvey.
Marcus Garvey. We'll explore his full, radical philosophy for mental and physical liberation.
If this deep dive helped you think about how to hold your anger differently and gave you a framework for perseverance, share it with one friend who needs Mandela's kind of quiet courage today. We'll see you next time.